Thank you very much. It's a great honor to be here to speak on perspectives of the Global South. In this case, I would like to look at the crisis that has been in Russia and Ukraine since 2014. You know, this crisis started in 2014 when Russia made a move on Crimea. And the world thought probably it was going to be a short issue. And then that conflict went on and Russia annexed Crimea. And a few years later, Russia made a second move, which is what we are in right now since last year, February. Now, ordinarily or historically, the Global South are well known to align with the West, you know, in almost every conflict. Remember the conflicts that we've had in the Middle East, the Iraqi war, the Afghan war, and some other conflicts. But this particular conflict is of a different dimension in the sense that it caught the Global South in the middle. Why do I say so? Why do I say so? Historically, a lot of the countries in the Global South has a lot of attachment to the warring countries, Russia and Ukraine. And it will be difficult to take a stance because, as we all know, over the generations, Africa or the Global South has borne the brunt of conflicts in the West. So it will be a risky adventure if the Global South decides to align wholly with the West. You saw at the onset of the conflict, the first sign of crisis in Africa was the lack of wheat. And we all know how long it took to get Russia to agree for Ukraine to export wheat from the Black Sea. And unfortunately, yesterday, Russia pulled out of this deal. And this morning, the DG of WTO, Okonjo-Iweala, expressed her sadness, and yesterday the UN Secretary General did the same. Now, you could see how much impact the cessation of wheat export did on African countries. Hunger increased, you know, by many folds. And Africa is so poor, relying on the West, on Russia, Ukraine, for so many things. You know, like the former speakers have said, importation of fertilizers, steel, wheat, almost Africa depends a great deal on Russia and Ukraine. And also historically on security issues, so many African countries are aligned with Russia. So how could they take a stance against Russia, knowing that 50, 60, 70% of their military hardware and training comes from Russia? And it's not only African countries. India has taken their position never to align in this matter. And we have also seen historical, dissent from the Chinese or the North Koreans. You know, it's difficult for Africa to take a stance because so many African countries are surviving today based on whatever loans or aids they get from the Chinese. So if they openly say, hey, we align with the West, knowing that China is, tacitly behind Russia in this conflict because of their own historical issues with the Taiwanese, then they will be angering China at the same time. So it's difficult for them to go headlong with the West. So, you see, when you are operating from a weak point, there is little or nothing you can do in conflicts. Africa has been from the position of weakness economically, militarily, technologically. So their hands are tied. And African countries always opt for diplomacy in sorting out, international relation issues. African countries don't usually advocate for wars, for conflicts, because Africa has also borne the brunt of conflicts, even for the continental struggles, So Africa is war scarred in so many areas, whether internal strife or, other forms of issues. So Africa would not choose war as a first option in any matter. So they don't jump or run along when conflicts arise. And for regional priorities also, which is one of the reasons why the Global South choose to be a little reticent in going with the West on this war. Because of the numerous challenges that African countries are facing, which I've already mentioned earlier, poverty, conflicts within its borders, and developmental gaps, African nations often prioritize addressing internal issues and fostering regional stability. For instance, a country like Nigeria has been dealing with terrorism, since 2012, banditry. When ISIS got dislodged in the Middle East, ISWAP metamorphosed, in northeast Nigeria, joining with Boko Haram. So Nigeria ends up struggling to maintain peace within its borders. And this is also the case with so many African countries. So they already have, their hands are full. They already have, a lot on their hands than to start taking sides on international conflicts. And Nigeria, like the Professor Dauda said, has so many students who are in Russia, not just Nigeria. Other African countries have got so many students whose academic studies has been disrupted in both Russia and Ukraine because of the conflicts. So considering all these things, it will be difficult for the Global South to take a stance. They will rather remain neutral because they don't know how it's going to end. You only see the beginning of a conflict, but you can't see the end until you get there. And it is not common for modern conflicts to end in battlefield, because at the end of the day, after all said and done, the parties must come to the negotiating table to solve the problem. Yes, the war has gone on for 18 months now or thereabout, but everybody is expecting that at some point, these countries will come and negotiate. And depending on how it ends, those who take stance, especially weak countries like the Global South, may find themselves disadvantaged by the final outcome. Because you never know tomorrow who will be dictating the events that happens. So, and again, the Global South don't feel comfortable aligning with the West. Colonialism, and then today we are talking about neocolonialism. The West continues to meddle in the internal affairs of the Global South. and sometimes most times with very negative consequences. So many countries cannot get their democracy or their political system right because the colonial masters who have given them independence but have made sure that they don't remain truly independent to chart their own course. So they continue to meddle in the political affairs, thereby retarding their efforts at growth and making them perpetually dependent on them. So there are these grievances, these are deep-rooted grievances, which will make it difficult for them to run headlong with such a master, because they know that they don't have their best interests at heart. Today, Nigeria has found large deposits of uranium. The other day, Elon Musk visited and was saying, oh, give me your uranium. And Nigeria is saying, no, you know what? If you want our uranium, set up the factory here to produce the lithium batteries. Would he do it? The answer is hanging in the air. But it's running in other developed countries. He was in France the other day promising to set up one of his gigafactories. Why can't he set up a gigafactory in Africa? He just wants the material. And it's not only with him, but with also all the multinational companies. This morning I was watching in the news the international oil companies that are extracting crude oil from Nigeria are joining in fuel importation. How can you extract crude oil from this country and you don't want to set up a refinery there? You want to import fuel? Because they have no confidence in the place. So these are all the deep-rooted issues, and there are many more, which I believe I will be able to clarify during the questions. Thank you very much.